I had a friend who was a radio officer in an Eskimo village, as it was then, and he had a radio. And one of them came in one day, was looking at it, took the radio apart, and put it back together again. He'd never seen a radio in his life. Their technical skills are absolutely incredible. And Ron said to him, "Well, how could you do that?" And he said, "Well, he said if we needed it, we could build a radio." But we don't have a need for it.
My dad was a radio officer in the war when he was stationed in Paris.
Yeah.
Long time back.
Yeah. Well, as I said, the Inuit people, they could take anything and turn it into something useful. I mean, look at the kayak as the most incredible vehicle, ship that you could imagine. And sailing in incredibly dangerous waters. And by the way, when we talk about past weather, and in the period from about 1690 to 1730, about a 40-year span, there are at least 6 reports of Eskimos in kayaks showing up on the coast of Scotland.
Interesting. Can I bring you back to something about Greenland?
Yes, okay.
Yeah. Is the Greenland ice sheet breaking or melting or neither? What's the bottom line on Greenland? Because a lot of the imagery we see...
Yeah, the answer is all of the above. Greenland, of course, is it's left over from the last ice age. And one of the things, first of all, the bottom of the ice is below sea level. If the Greenland ice cap was to melt completely, you'd simply be left with a string of islands around the outside because the weight of the ice pushes the land down. And the same is true of Antarctica. You drill down in the Antarctic ice, by the time you get to the bottom, you're several thousand feet below sea level. And but the Greenland ice cap, of course, when they get to a certain size, these ice caps create their own climate and can maintain themselves. And one of the things that anybody that's been around the edges of these very large glaciers, Antarctica or Greenland, the winds are very, very strong. I mean, there's a place, Cape Denison in the Antarctic, where the average wind speed is about 55 miles an hour.
Wow.
And the reason for that is it's the cold air draining off of the glacier. And of course, it drains down off the dome of the glacier out to the oceans all around. And it's called katabatic flow. It's a lovely word. People that talk to anybody that's flown into Thule, Greenland, for example, the American military base there, you can experience incredibly strong winds. And quite often they have to close the airport there because of it. And so the glacier itself creates its own climate by this drainage. Generally, snowfalls over the glacier are quite low because they are high pressure, because of the cold air, high pressure areas. And both the Antarctic and the Arctic, the South Pole and North Pole, are what we call, in climate terms, cold deserts. That is that the amount of precipitation annually is extremely low. The North Pole, for example, is about 2 millimeters a year, which is fractions of an inch of precipitation. But it looks like there's lots because the snow falls and doesn't melt. And but the Greenland ice cap then has its own climate pattern. It is, of course, as with all glaciers, it's actually because it's in the line of the Gulf Stream and the warm air flowing in, it gets more snowfall than our Antarctica or the North Pole, but still relatively low. But you've got snowfall falling, and of course, the amount of snow falling determines the dynamics of the glacier as much, and in most times more, than the temperature. So the interior of Greenland is getting snowfall. That's accumulating, pushing down, and as it pushes down, the plastic ice flows out to around the edges of the glacier, and where that floats out into the oceans, particularly along fjords, that's where you get the icebergs calving off. The same thing happens around Antarctica. The ice pushes out into the ocean, ice floats because it's a lower specific gravity than the water, and of course with the tides and the waves and the action, they break off. And of course the one that everybody knows about is the iceberg that sunk the Titanic. And so what's happening is you can take any part of Greenland and you can show one area where the ice is melting more rapidly than another, because there are the regional climates in different parts of it, different things are going on. It's a very large body of ice. Right now, all the evidence is that the Greenland ice cap is getting larger, and the increase of glaciers off of it is a measure of that. They're not a measure of melting, they're a measure of a growing ice cap. And we had the same thing up on Baffin Island about 3 or 4 years ago when a large shelf of ice broke off, and everybody said, oh, this is warming. No, it wasn't. It was because increased snowfall on Baffin Island had caused the mass of ice to increase.
Can you imagine how many people don't know what to accept?
Oh, I know.
And not even how to think about this?
Yeah. Kim, I taught a course called, it was actually a science credit for art students, and I just called it The Way the Earth Works. And I said, as citizens of Earth, you need to know how your planet functions, because if you don't, you can be exploited. People can come along and tell you this is going on and that's going on, and you won't know. It's the same way that I argued in any curriculum. There should be at least an hour on how to roof a house, because everybody's going to have to roof a house sooner or later. Now, they're not going to have to do it, but if they don't know how it's done, then some unscrupulous tradesman can come along and take advantage of them. And that's what our education, where it's failing us so badly, is it's not teaching people to be students of Earth and citizens of Earth. And this is made worse, by the way, Kim, because most students, 80%, are not scientists. In fact, are afraid of science and almost proud of that. And you see that in law schools. Almost all the lawyers are art students, not science students, yet they're more and more every day confronted with scientific issues about solar collectors and pollution and all these other things. They're not prepared to deal with it.
I agree with you. And I wanted to talk a little bit about this other piece here that came from the AP as the source that was reported in this online emergency and disaster information services for Budapest, Hungary. And it says, leaking Siberian ice prompts methane warning. As Siberia's thawing permafrost leaks methane, some scientists are warning of another emerging climate threat. I don't want to take us off track in terms of what the focus was, but what are they talking about?
No, it doesn't take us off track at all. Now, I'll take you off track initially as a lead into this. Methane became an issue because it's one of the greenhouse gases. Okay.
What percentage of it is in the greenhouse gas, is it?
About 0.009%.
Okay.
It's fractional. But it became an issue because it served two purposes. It served a purpose as a greenhouse gas, but it also served a purpose for the animal rights people and the anti-beef brigade. Okay, and Jeremy Rifkin, and I hate to give him any credit or mention his name even, but he wrote a book called After Beef, and he blamed the cow for all of the problems of Western civilization. Incredible thing.
Wow.
And of course they were saying that the cows are producing methane and that's causing global warming. And a lot of the farmers, I worked as a technical advisor for the Canadian Cattlemen's Association, and they were genuinely concerned. They said, is this a real problem? Do we need to worry about it? What's going on here? And then Rifkin came out with his book. Now, you haven't heard much about the methane lately until this kind of article.
This came out November 23rd, 2010.
Yeah, well, they're doing that because CO2 is starting to lose its luster. People are starting to realize it's not the cause. So you flip back to the methane one. Well, I say, well, if that doesn't work, we'll go back to this scare. And so the methane issue has come back into the news because the CO2 arguments and the email leaks and all the rest of it. Plus, of course, the reason they changed from global warming to climate change was because CO2 is going up and the global temperatures are going down. And so they've got a problem there. But the methane issue, as I said, that's where it started originally. But of course, then people saw it as more in terms of, oh, it's a greenhouse gas, and therefore we've got to reduce it. New Zealand even planned to introduce, and they're still working on it, a tax on animals that produce methane. And of course, were you going to include humans in that, I guess? I don't know.
I would imagine we're made of carbon dioxide, too.
Yeah.
Can you explain something else to us, create a context for us? permafrost, I get a lot of emails saying